The doctors had already stepped back. The monitors were silent. The room had gone still in the way rooms only go still, when everyone present has accepted that there is nothing left to do. Dr. Marcus Hale stood at the foot of the bed, with his hands at his sides. He had been a surgeon for 22 years. He had learned in that time how to hold his face when medicine ran out of answers. He was holding it now. 2 nurses stood near the wall. One of them was looking at the floor. And Adrian Sinclair was pressed against the window with both hands over his mouth, staring at his daughter, as if he could keep her here by refusing to look away. Isabella had stopped responding 4 minutes ago. Every attempt to revive her had failed. Marcus turned toward Adrian. He did not need to speak. Adrian had been watching his face for the last 4 minutes and already knew what the turn meant. Then the door opened. Nobody noticed him at first. He was maybe 22 years old. Worn jacket, oil-stained hands. The kind of quietness that comes from spending too much time being invisible. He had a backpack over one shoulder, and he was breathing hard, as if he had been running. He stopped, just inside the doorway. His eyes moved across the room once. Across the monitors. Across Isabella. Across the angle of her neck against the pillow. Something shifted in his face. Not panic, not hesitation. Recognition. He crossed the room before anyone could stop him. He reached the bed, set his backpack down without a word, and repositioned Isabella's left shoulder with both hands. Gently, precisely, angling her body in a way that opened the clavicle and shifted the weight off the compressed vessel beneath. "What are you doing?" One of the nurses moved toward him. Adrian pushed off the window. "Who are you?" The young man did not let go. "Please, just give me 1 minute." Something in his voice stopped the room. Not authority. Not volume. The particular steadiness of a person who is not performing confidence, but actually has it. 30 seconds passed. Then Isabella's monitor flickered. 1 beat. Then another. Then the line staggered back into rhythm like a child learning to walk. The nurse who had been moving toward him stopped completely still with her hand over her heart. Marcus stared at the monitor. Then at the young man. Then at the monitor again. Adrian slid down the wall until he was sitting on the hospital floor with his face in his hands. The young man stepped back from the bed, picked up his backpack, and was almost in the hallway before Adrian looked up. "Wait." He stopped. Adrian got to his feet. He crossed the room and stood in front of him and looked at him, the way a man looks at something he cannot yet fully understand. "What is your name?" Leo Bennett." "How did you know what to do?" Leo was quiet for a second. "Because I've seen it before." And that was the beginning. Not of Isabella's recovery. That would take weeks and 2 more surgeries and the kind of slow grinding hope that is harder than despair because it keeps asking you to keep going. But of the thing that happened between a billionaire who had built walls around everything he loved and a poor boy who had spent his whole life on the other side of walls, exactly like that. This is how it actually started. If you have ever been told you do not belong in a room that needed you, this story is for you. Welcome to Aurora Cinema Fiction. Stay with us. If this story moves you, please subscribe, like, and share. It means everything to this channel. Leo had wanted to be a doctor since he was 14 years old. Not in the vague, distant way that children want things they have seen on television. In the specific consuming way that happens when you watch someone you love stop breathing and understand with total clarity that the difference between life and death in that moment is knowledge. And that you do not have it. His sister Ava had been 5 years old. A fever that turned into pneumonia in a body already tired from not enough food and too much cold. He had been sitting in an emergency room while his mother begged a receptionist to please let the doctor see her again because the medication was not working. The receptionist said, "Please sit down." The doctor came 20 minutes too late. Ava was gone before the morning. Leo had been 14 years old and powerless and smart enough to understand exactly what had happened and why. He began reading medicine that same week. Not textbooks he could not afford. Not courses he could not access. Whatever he could find. Donated pamphlets, outdated journals left outside campus buildings, library books borrowed on cards he remembered to keep valid. He read about airways and pressure and vascular compression and the 100 small things the body does when it is in distress that look like one thing but mean another. He read about thoracic outlet compression in a borrowed cardiology journal at 17, sitting in the back of a garage after his shift, because the light stayed on longest back there. 6 months after Ava died, his mother got sick. A tumor that started with headaches and ended with Leo standing in a hospital corridor, understanding that he was now the only thing between his siblings and the street. Matteo was 9. Eva was 6. Leo quit school. He got a job. Then the garage, which paid better and had a back room with decent light, where he kept reading after his shifts ended. Matteo was 17 now, and still forgot his inhaler unless Leo texted him twice. Eva was 16 and wanted to be an architect and drew floor plans on the backs of takeout bags when she thought no one was watching. Leo photographed every one of them and never told her. He still read medicine at night. Not because he believed it would become anything. He read because it did not stop mattering to him, just because he could not afford it. There were people who had made that possible without knowing it. A retired surgeon named Dr. Osei had left a box of old cardiology journals outside the library because he was moving and could not throw them away. Leo found that box at 6:30 in the morning on his way to an early shift. He took 3 journals and read them until the spines cracked. A librarian named Mrs. Adayeze left the side door unlocked on the nights she saw Leo's name on the return slip because she had decided privately that the rules about closing time were made for people who had other options. A garage owner named Mr. Chukwu hired Leo at 17, when no one else would, and quietly upgraded the lighting in the back room when he noticed Leo was reading there after shifts. None of these people were in the operating room the night Isabella Sinclair's life hung by a thread. All of them were. Every borrowed journal, every unlocked door, every small act of one person choosing to make things slightly easier for another, without knowing what it would one day make possible. This is what Aurora Cinema Fiction believes. That kindness travels further than the person who gives it will ever know. The night Leo found Isabella was a Thursday. He was walking home from the garage because the last bus had gone, and he was $3 short of a ride. It was raining. He had his jacket hood up and his eyes on the wet pavement when he heard it. Not loud, not dramatic. A small broken intake of breath from an alley to his left. Against the wall, half collapsed beside a dumpster, was a child. She looked about 9 years old. Dark hair plastered to her face by the rain. A dress that cost more than Leo's monthly wages, soaked through and clinging to thin arms wrapped around her own chest. Her lips were pale. Not cold pale. Wrong pale. Leo crossed the alley without thinking. He crouched in front of her. The rain hammered the pavement. "Hey, I see you. Can you look at me?" Her eyes opened. Dark. Terrified. "My chest," she started. Stopped. Tried again. "I can't." Leo pressed 2 fingers to her wrist. Fast pulse. Too fast. Thready in a way that made his stomach drop. "Okay. I've got you. What's your name?" "Isabella." A breath that cost her something. Isabella Sinclair. The name registered distantly. A newspaper photo. The kind of name that belonged to a different world entirely. None of that mattered right now. He slid one arm beneath her knees and lifted. She was too light. The way sick people are light. He stood up with her against his chest and started walking. Toward St. Catherine's, 11 blocks north. Leo walked all 11 in the rain. Isabella drifted in and out against his shoulder, her fingers occasionally gripping his jacket, with the desperate instinct of someone trying not to let go. Twice she said something he could not hear over the storm. The third time he leaned closer. "My dad," she whispered. "Please tell my dad." "I will," Leo said. "I promise." He kept walking. The emergency department at St. Catherine's did not normally receive patients carried through the front door by soaking wet men in oil-stained jackets. The moment Leo stepped through the sliding glass doors, 2 nurses were already moving. He set Isabella down and stepped back while the staff converged. She collapsed in an alley, rapid pulse, labored breathing. She's been in and out for 15 minutes. Her name is Isabella Sinclair. The effect of that name was immediate. Within minutes, Isabella was on a gurney and disappearing behind swinging doors. Leo stood in the waiting room alone, soaking wet, hands still shaking from the cold. He should have left. He was still standing there 40 minutes later when Adrian Sinclair arrived. Leo recognized him from newspaper photos. Mid-50s. Silver at the temples. Tonight, he looked like none of that. He came through the doors with the expression of a man who had prepared himself for the worst and was begging to be wrong. A nurse pointed in Leo's direction. Adrian crossed the waiting room and stopped in front of him. Yes. Adrian's jaw worked. Did she say anything? She asked me to find her dad. Something in Adrian's face fractured, then sealed itself back together. He looked at Leo for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you," in a voice stripped of everything except the meaning itself. He turned and walked toward the doctors. Leo reached into his jacket pocket. His fingers found something small and cold. A silver bracelet. Thin chain. A tiny engraved star. 2 initials on the clasp. IS. It must have slipped from Isabella's wrist when he lifted her. He tucked it back into his pocket and walked out into the rain. He came back the next morning. Not because he had planned to. He had gone home, changed his clothes, made Matteo's breakfast, and then stood in the kitchen for 4 minutes, unable to make himself leave. He thought about Isabella's voice in the rain. "Please tell my dad." He took the bus back to St. Catherine's. He found the room because a nurse took one look at the bracelet in his hand and walked him there herself. Adrian was inside. He had not left. His tie was gone. His eyes were red. He was sitting beside Isabella's bed with one hand wrapped around her small fingers. She was on a ventilator. Not responding. Leo stopped in the doorway. Adrian looked up. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Leo held out the bracelet. She dropped it in the alley. Adrian was on his feet before he realized he had moved. His thumb moved over the clasp, over the initials. "She never takes this off." His voice had gone somewhere very quiet. He looked at Leo then. Not with gratitude, not yet. With the sharp, careful look of a man who has spent 20 years protecting his daughter from people who want something from the Sinclair name. "What do you actually want?" Leo looked back at him. Then he held out the bracelet. He did not say anything. He simply held it out. Adrian looked at it for a long moment. Then he took it. Before either of them could speak, a sharp alarm exploded from Isabella's monitors. The room erupted. Nurses flooded in. Dr. Marcus Hale appeared from the corridor. The numbers on the screen began to fall. Leo stepped toward the wall. He watched Isabella's chest, the way her shoulders were pulling unevenly, the way her neck muscles strained on every breath, the oxygen drop worsening as she leaned against the raised pillow. He stepped forward. Roll support under her left shoulder. Her airway is being compressed by her position. Open the clavicle angle. A nurse looked at him sharply. The respiratory therapist hesitated, then grabbed a folded blanket. They lifted Isabella, carefully tucking support beneath her shoulder. The oxygen numbers stopped falling, then slowly began to climb. The nurse exhaled in disbelief. Marcus stared at the monitor, then at Leo. That was the moment. Not the night in the rain, not the emergency room, not the bracelet. That was the moment everything changed. Marcus Hale was staring at Leo the way a man stares when he recognizes something from a long time ago. "What is your name?" "Leo Bennett." Marcus repeated it slowly, as if it were a key turning in a lock he had forgotten existed. "Come with me." Marcus shut the consultation room door. Adrian sat down slowly. Leo stood near the window with his hands in his pockets. "Did you ever apply to St. Catherine's Foundation Scholarship Program?" Leo's expression changed. "Just enough." Adrian frowned. "What scholarship?" Marcus kept his eyes on Leo. 8 years ago, you were 14. Out of nearly 400 applicants, you scored the highest marks we had ever seen. Perfect scores in anatomy. Advanced chemistry answers a first-year medical student would have been proud of. He paused. You were supposed to become a doctor. The room fell silent. Why didn't you go? Adrian asked. Leo looked at the floor. My mum got sick. Matteo was 9. Eva was 6. We didn't have savings. We barely had rent. A short, flat laugh. So, a scholarship interview kind of stopped mattering. You should have contacted us, Marcus said. Leo looked up. And said what? Sorry, I can't become the doctor you all wanted, because I need to work nights at a grocery store and mornings at a garage, so my family doesn't get evicted. Marcus had no answer. My mother died 6 months later, so I quit school, got a full-time job, then another one. Eventually the jobs became my life. Adrian looked at him steadily. And now? Something in Leo's face softened. Matteo is 17, still forgets his inhaler unless I text him twice. He almost smiled. Eva wants to be an architect. She draws floor plans on the backs of takeout bags. A pause. I still read medicine at night, when everyone's asleep. You still study? Library books, old journals, whatever I can find. Why? Oh. Leo looked at Marcus as if the answer should have been obvious. Because it didn't stop mattering to me just because I couldn't afford it. That sentence sat in the room longer than any of the others. Marcus looked at his hands. Adrian turned away for a moment, jaw tight. Because there was something brutal about hearing someone speak so simply about a dream they had been forced to abandon without ever actually letting it die. Keep watching. The best part is coming. Marcus ordered full vascular imaging on Isabella. Positional views. The kind of scan that required specific angles because what he was now looking for only appeared under certain conditions. Leo stood in the back corner of the imaging suite, hands clasped. Barely breathing. Adrian was outside the glass with one hand pressed flat against the observation window. The first images loaded. Standard views. Nothing unusual. Then the technician adjusted the angle. Dr. Meera Patel leaned closer to the screen. Wait. Dr. Hargrove stiffened. Patel pointed. There. On the scan, just beneath the collarbone, a narrowed section of vessel appeared, where it should not have. Compressed. Restricted. Wrong. A vascular compression, affecting oxygen delivery under stress. Hidden beneath inflammation. Missed, because everyone had been treating what was obvious, instead of looking for what was hidden. My God, Patel whispered. Hargrove said nothing. Leo felt his knees weaken so suddenly, he had to grip the back of a chair. Adrian stared at the image. Then he turned toward Hargrove. You missed it. Hargrove swallowed. It's rare. Adrian's voice dropped to something quiet and devastating. You missed it. No one in the room answered that. Because the poor boy in the oil-stained jacket had just shown the room what million-dollar specialists had missed. They prepped Isabella immediately. Hargrove objected. Adrian's response was 4 words. Schedule it, right now. Patel agreed the delay was more dangerous than the operation. Marcus agreed with Patel. Leo was standing in the hallway intending to finally leave when Adrian stopped him. Come with us. To the OR. I can't. That wasn't a question. Hargrove appeared at the end of the corridor. Adrian looked at him. If the only person in this hospital who noticed what was killing my daughter says her positioning matters, then he stays where I can hear him. He is the reason my daughter is still breathing. No one answered that. Leo looked at Adrian. I'm not a surgeon. No, but tonight, you're the only one I trust. Those words hit Leo harder than they should have. Because trust was not something men like Adrian Sinclair handed to boys like Leo Bennett. Not in hospitals like this. Not ever. And yet here it was. Leo nodded. The operating room was its own universe. No rain, no city, no garage. Only white surgical lights, the relentless pulse of machines, and Isabella lying small and still beneath sterile blue drapes. Leo stood exactly where Patel placed him, behind the surgical line. close enough to see the monitors. Far enough to make no one nervous. The approach was precise. The navigation toward the compressed vessel, careful and controlled. Then the numbers dipped. Blood welled faster than expected. More inflammation than the scan had shown. Her sats are falling. 82. Adrian's hand hit the observation glass. Inside, Leo stood motionless. Something was wrong beyond the bleeding. His eyes moved from the surgical field to the monitor to Isabella's upper chest, a subtle swelling above the clavicle, pulsing with each strained beat. His mind flashed to a borrowed cardiology journal, a chapter read alone in a garage at midnight. A child whose vascular compression had masked a second congenital defect, rare, brutal, easy to miss until surgery destabilized everything. The vein above the clavicle, it's backing up. There's a second obstruction. You're decompressing half the problem and destabilizing the other half. Patel froze. 1 second. She shifted her angle. Hargrove, move the retractor. Now. He did. Patel went deeper. There it was, hidden beneath inflamed tissue and shadow. Another constriction viciously placed. He's right. Hargrove's face drained behind the mask. We're losing her. Clamp. Suction. We fix both compressions, or we lose her. The next minutes were an hour stretched over broken glass. Leo stood perfectly still. Outside the glass, Adrian was pacing. Then the alarm. V-fib. Clear. Isabella's small body jolted on the table. Adrian saw it through the glass. His face changed into something Leo would never forget. The naked helplessness of a father watching his child leave him, one heartbeat at a time. Again, clear. The line on the monitor spasmed, then flattened. Leo stopped breathing. The long, unbroken tone of a heart that had stopped. And suddenly, Leo was no longer in that operating room. He was 14 years old, sitting in an emergency room, listening to his mother beg a receptionist, watching a doctor arrive 20 minutes too late. He had spent 8 years reading medicine in borrowed light, so that he would never have to hear that sound again. Come on, Leo whispered. Come on. Another compression. Another medication. Then a spike. Tiny. Fragile. But there. The line staggered back into rhythm. We have rhythm. Patel did not waste the miracle. Don't celebrate. We're not done. For another hour, they worked through the repaired field. Both compression points stabilized. Bleeding controlled. When it was finally over, Patel stepped back and closed her eyes for one brief second. Then she looked at Leo. She's alive. Leo did not realize he was crying until he tasted salt on his lips. Outside the glass, Adrian sagged against the wall, as if someone had cut the strings holding him upright. He covered his face with both hands. Not because he was a billionaire, because he was a father who had just been given back his daughter. They moved Isabella to intensive care before dawn. Hargrove gave Adrian a clipped summary. Surgery successful. Next 24 hours critical. Guarded but hopeful. Then he was gone. Adrian crossed the hallway toward Leo. Leo looked terrible. Exhaustion carved into his face. The oil still faint on his hands that no amount of hospital soap had fully reached. Adrian stopped in front of him. No cameras. No audience. Just a father and a boy who had stood between his daughter and death. You saved her. Leo shook his head. The surgeons. You saw what they missed. Twice. You kept her alive long enough to get her on that table. And when the surgery turned, you saw what no one else in that room saw. Leo had no answer. Adrian reached into his coat pocket and held out a card. My direct number, not my office, not an assistant, mine. Why? Because if my daughter is alive, it is because of you. You don't owe me anything. Adrian's expression shifted. Something almost pained. What do you need? He said. Not what do you want. What do you need? Leo gave a short, exhausted laugh. Money, time. A way to support Matteo and Eva without working 80 hours a week. A chance to study without choosing between textbooks and rent. He shrugged. The usual. Adrian did not smile, because none of that sounded usual. Would you still want medicine? He asked quietly, if those things disappeared. Yes. The answer came before Leo had decided to give it. Yes, he said softer, I would. Adrian nodded once. Then I'm going to help you. No, that wasn't a question. I can't take charity. This isn't charity. It's an investment. Leo stared at him. I'm not offering because I pity you. I'm offering because my daughter is alive, and because a young man with your instincts should not spend the rest of his life hiding under car hoods when he belongs in a hospital. You don't even know me. I know what you did when nobody was watching. I know you carried a sick child through the rain. I know you returned something you could have kept. I know you spoke up, in a room full of doctors, when it would have been easier to stay quiet. A pause. That's enough for me to start. Leo stood very still. He had spent years becoming suspicious of hope, because hope had a habit of arriving late and leaving early. What happens when I can't do it? Adrian looked at him for a long moment. Then you fail an exam, you take it again, you work harder, you keep going. He shook his head. Failure isn't the thing that disqualifies you, Leo. Quitting is. The hallway fell silent. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, my office. Leo still did not move. If you don't show up, I'll assume you're scared. Something flickered across Leo's face. Adrian almost smiled. I've learned that challenging a stubborn man is more effective than convincing him. For the first time all night, something like reluctant amusement crossed Leo's face. You don't know me very well. Adrian's eyes shifted toward Isabella's room. No, he said quietly, but my daughter apparently does. The foundation paperwork moved quickly. A full scholarship. Not a loan. Not a conditional grant with 40 pages of requirements. Tuition. Housing allowance. A clinical placement tied to Marcus Hale's research mentorship. And a separate fund for Matteo and Eva that Adrian referred to without ceremony as the part that matters most. Leo refused it once. Then he sat across from Adrian in an office so large it had its own weather system and told him in precise detail every reason this was a terrible idea. Adrian listened to all of it. Are you done? Leo blinked. Sign the papers. Leo, why are you doing this? Not for the first time, but this time without the armor around it. Adrian was quiet for a moment. My wife died 12 years ago, complications after Isabella was born. A clot they thought they had caught in time. He looked at his desk. I was on a call in another wing. By the time I got back, she was already gone. The office went very still. I have spent every year since funding the best medical staff in the country, building the best private wing, hiring the best specialists, and it almost wasn't enough, because the best people in the world were looking at the wrong thing. He met Leo's eyes. You looked at the right thing, not because you had better training, because you paid attention when it cost you nothing to walk away. Leo was quiet for a long time. Then he reached across the desk and picked up the pen. Isabella was as promised, spectacularly difficult during her recovery. She refused physical therapy unless Leo came to count with her. She informed 2 nurses and 1 cardiologist that their encouragement was not inspiring. She told Adrian in front of dinner guests that Leo was smarter than your work friends, and nicer, and also he doesn't talk over people. Adrian stared at his daughter for a full 5 seconds. Then said you're right about all of it, and this is still not appropriate dinner conversation. Isabella smiled the smile of someone who had won and knew it. She asked about Matteo's asthma. She asked about Eva's floor plans. She asked Leo once whether mechanics and doctors could be the same person, because she had decided that was what she wanted to be. Leo found himself showing up, not because Adrian asked him to, not because the scholarship required it, but because Isabella Sinclair had decided he was hers, and he had no good defense against a 9-year-old who held his hand during breathing exercises and told him very seriously that he was going to be excellent. You don't know that, he told her once. She gave him the look she reserved for things she found genuinely baffling. I picked you in an alley in the rain. I have very good judgment. Leo bit the inside of his cheek for the rest of the session. On the first anniversary of Isabella's surgery, they returned to St. Catherine's together. Not for bad news. Not for a complication. For the opening of the new pediatric diagnostic wing, funded jointly by the Sinclair Foundation and the Ava Bennett Initiative. A wing dedicated to children who deserved to be heard before it was too late. Adrian spoke first. Brief. Composed. Then he handed the microphone to Leo. Leo stood at the podium and looked out at the room. At Marcus Hale in the third row. At Hargrove in the back, looking like a man who had made his peace with something. At Dr. Patel near the aisle, who gave him a small nod. At Matteo and Eva near the front. At Isabella beside Adrian with her legs swinging because she still could not sit still for more than 4 minutes. When my sister died, my family learned how dangerous it is to be told to wait when something is already wrong. When Isabella got sick, a room full of brilliant people almost made the same mistake again. The difference is that this time, someone listened before it was too late. The room went quiet. This wing exists because children should not need luck to be taken seriously. Parents should not need money to ask for a second opinion. And no one should lose the person they love because help arrived after the clock ran out. He looked at Isabella. She was crying. She would pretend later that she was not. No one would believe her. A little girl once told me that she picked me in an alley in the rain and had very good judgment. A pause. She wasn't wrong, but the truth is, she saved me first. The room rose to its feet, not because it was a performance. Because it was true. Afterward, Isabella pulled Leo and Adrian toward the bronze plaque beside the wing entrance. The Isabella Sinclair Pediatric Diagnostic Center. In honor of every child who deserved to be heard sooner, and in memory of the sister who taught one boy to listen. For Ava. Leo stood with one hand over his mouth. Adrian stood beside him. Too much. Leo shook his head. Exactly enough. Isabella took both their hands and dragged them into the ribbon-cutting photograph. Matteo yelled from the crowd that Leo should smile like a normal person. Eva told Matteo to stop talking. The camera flashed, and for once, the moment did not feel fragile. It felt earned. Late that night, after the speeches and the ribbon and the endless congratulations had finally faded, Leo found Adrian in the sunroom at the Sinclair house. The city glowed beyond the glass. The house was quiet. Adrian looked up as Leo entered. Still awake. I learned from someone who studies at midnight. Leo sat beside him. For a while neither of them spoke. Then from upstairs a floorboard creaked. Almost certainly Isabella. Almost certainly heading toward the kitchen, in direct violation of every post-midnight rule. They both heard it. Then her voice came down the stairs. Leo. Leo looked at the ceiling. Still here. A pause. Good. Because I have a question about the respiratory system, and it cannot wait until morning. Adrian put his face in his hands. Leo laughed. Not a polite laugh. Not a tired one. The real kind. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and unexpected, and reminds a person that they are still capable of it. He looked at Adrian. Adrian looked at him. Two men who had organized their entire lives around the people who needed them. Who had recognized each other in a hospital hallway before they had the words for it. Who had built something in the space of one impossible year that neither of them had planned, and both of them needed. I'll go, Leo said. He stood. Adrian said quietly. Same time next week. Not a question. Leo paused at the door. For Isabella, he said. Adrian's expression stayed entirely neutral. Obviously. Leo went upstairs. And in the quiet of that impossible house with the city spread below, and the people they loved finally safe inside it, the truth settled gently between them. The doctors had given up on the billionaire's daughter. But a poor boy had walked in. And in saving her, he had somehow saved all of them. Thank you for spending this time with us. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it today. Subscribe to Aurora Cinema Fiction. Leave a comment below and tell us where in the world you are watching from. You might be surprised how many people felt exactly what you just felt. And remember, every story we tell is made with one purpose, to make you feel deeply and remind you that love in all its forms is always worth fighting for.